She fed her daughter pills 3 times a day for 30 years. The reason she did this was not because her daughter was sick but because she wanted her daughter to be sick. Because it was the only way she could achieve her hidden agenda. Xiao Mei has become paralyzed under her mother's care. She also has severe diabetes and asthma. But one day, she couldn't keep it together. While stealing a chocolate bar, Mei accidentally discovered that the pills she took every day were prescribed by the doctor for her mother. Before she went to bed, she asked her mother why these pills were prescribed for you. Her mother smiled and gave her an excuse. Xiao Mei believed her and took the pills. But the next day, she looked at the pills in her hand and became suspicious. So she took out her homemade robotic arm and removed the pills from her hand. But strangely, the label on it was her name again. Mei was convinced that she had read it correctly yesterday. So she carefully lifted the label, and there was her mother's name at the bottom. A seed of doubt began to grow. In the middle of the night, when her mother was asleep, she went to the ground floor and turned on the computer to check the effects of the pills on the internet, but found that the home is disconnected from the internet. What she didn't know was that her mother was watching every move she made. It turned out that her mother was also suspicious of Xiao Mei and cut off the internet in advance. And the next day she pretended to complain about the internet company in front of her daughter. Then she told her daughter that the internet would be cut off for a month, in order to cut off Xiao Mei's contact with the outside world. But the woman underestimated her daughter's ability. When her mother was watering the flowers, she sneaked into her mother's room and picked up the only wired phone in the house and called the local pharmacy. The caller remembered her home number, and she hung up immediately. But that didn't stop Mei from wanting the truth. She called a number-checking company. She dialed a private pharmacy in the next town over. With their help, she learned that the green stuff was actually used to treat heart disease. But why did her mother give her this medicine when there was nothing wrong with her heart?
What the hell are you?
In order to find out the truth, Xiao Mei proposed to go to a film. Before going out, she took all the pills she had hidden with her. Halfway through the film, she excused herself to go to the bathroom. Her mother was so enthralled that she didn't pay much attention to her. When she left the cinema, she sprinted to the pharmacy. But the queue for the bill was so long that if it had been her turn, her mother would have been looking for her. So she had to cut through the queue as a disabled person to get to the front desk. After making up 3 or 4 more excuses, she finally got her final answer. And what shocked her even more, the clerk said the medicine was not for your mother but for your dog. Xiao Mei asked what would happen if a person took too much of it. The clerk said it would cause paralysis of the thighs and long-term use would be no different from paralysis of the lower limbs. At the same time, her mother came after her. Mei had a sudden asthma attack and couldn't even call for help. Her mother even pretended to chase away the guests.
Please, will you please give us some space? Back off!
It's gonna be okay.
No.
When she woke up again, she was back in her own bed. Even the door was locked by her mother. But this is not at all difficult for the clever Xiao Mei. She found a lock-picking tool and unlocked the door in less than 2 seconds. But surprisingly, even after unlocking the door, it still wouldn't open. It turned out that her mother had tied the door with a broom. Is she going to be locked up in this house for the rest of her life? After a few moments of calm, Xiao Mei opened the window and checked the distance to her mother's room. She made a bold decision to escape. The first step was to eat her breakfast to replenish her energy. Then she took out all the wires and tied them tightly together. She took her soldering iron and took a sip of 80-degree water. She fought her way through the window to the sloping steps outside. It's very dangerous. She could fall if she's not careful. But she couldn't care less. In order to be free, Xiao Mei used all her strength to move forward little by little. I don't know how long it took to reach the window of her mother's room. She plugged in a pre-prepared soldering iron. Then she put it on the glass and sprayed it with 80-degree boiling water. The hot and cold water caused the glass to shatter instantly. In this way, Xiao Mei, who was well versed in mathematics, science and chemistry and was not afraid of disabilities, finally reached her mother's room. But at that moment, an accident happened. She had an asthma attack due to her physical exertion. She felt in her trouser pockets and went out of the window without her Tai Chi spray. Look at the phone behind her. Now even the only way to communicate with the outside world cable phone has been cut off by her mother. Xiao Mei crawled back to her room and took out the spray from the drawer. Then she went to the stairs and found that her mother had also destroyed the lift. She rolled down to the first floor with her heart in her mouth. At that moment, she was surprised to find that she could feel her feet, which had been paralyzed for 30 years. She had stopped taking the pills a few days before and didn't expect them to work so quickly. This further confirmed her mother's conspiracy. Then Xiao Mei stopped a passing oil truck on the roadside. She told the driver what happened and he promised to take her to the police station. But she didn't expect her mother to show up and knock out the driver. When she woke up again, she was in the basement of her home. Even the wheelchair was chained up and there was a strange sesame paste on the table. The documents spilled all over the floor were all related to Xiao Mei. And one of them was her dream college acceptance letter. It turned out that her mother had been lying to herself that she'd been the first to get a letter. Then she lied about not getting any letters from the university. Not far from the table there was a box about Ray. Xiaoli and who is she? Hard to crawl over to take down the box. The mystery finally surfaced at this moment. It turns out that Xiaomei is not the woman's real daughter at all. Her real daughter is called Xiaoli. Unfortunately, Xiaoli died at birth. In order to fill the hole in her heart, the woman stole Xiaomei from the hospital. As Xiaomei grew up, the woman's love for her mother became deformed. The woman came to the basement and found Xiaomei. She found Xiaoli's data. Her deepest wounds were revealed and she began to behave strangely. She poured the pills into the rubbish bin and begged her daughter to start over with her. Xiaomei looked at the acceptance letter and the report of her birth parents looking for her.
You didn't do this for me. You did this for you.
As the last piece of cover was lifted, the woman went completely insane. She took out a straw and drew a bucket full of sesame paste, ready to die with Xiaomei. Mei begged for mercy as she moved back and locked herself in the room. But if her mother came in, she'd be dead as well. She found a bottle of strange liquid and gambled with her life that a woman would never leave her. She was right. The woman couldn't leave her. After some resuscitation, Xiaomei was saved. But she couldn't speak with a tube in her mouth. So she used her eyes to signal the nurse that she wanted a pen. Luckily, the nurse read her eyes and gave her paper and a pen. Xiaomei managed to write down the letter M. The hospital's alarm lights went off. The nurse had to go to the next room for support, leaving Mei alone. Unbeknownst to her, her mother was behind it all. She took her out of the room, but she was too weak to resist. She couldn't do anything but look at the passers-by for help, but no one could read her. Luckily, the nurse found her missing, and the message she left behind. By now, they had reached the staircase in the lobby. Luckily, the stairs are very high and the lift is out of service. The woman had to find another way out. But she couldn't have imagined that her wheelchair was frozen in place. It turns out that Xiaomei used her strong will to control her right foot. She used her will to control her right foot to keep the wheels firmly in place. 7 years later, the woman was locked up in a special prison with a very haggard face. As Xiaomei gradually regained her mobility, she would come to visit her mother regularly. Every time she came, she gave her a big present.
I love you, Mom.